Quiet in here. Good afternoon and welcome to this month's Center Conversation. Really appreciate your coming out. Sorry about the weather, but it's better than it was a couple of days ago. So, my name is Tom Wiedemann, and it says here that I'm to welcome the audience. So welcome. I've got a whole list of announcements here, so I'm going to get started. We're a couple minutes early, but forgive me, Frank, Dave. I guess my first announcement is my usual sort of public broadcasting announcement, that the center is supported through donations. And so if you are of a mind to, and if you appreciate these center conversations, there is a little jar just inside the door asking for a voluntary contribution. We don't want that to be an obstacle to anyone coming, but if you're able to help us support these conversations, it would be deeply appreciated. So, a lot of thanks are in order, but first and foremost is our thanks to the Slot Car Club of the Southern Tier for really hosting this. Be sure when you go over, if you haven't already gotten your door prize ticket, please be sure and get a door prize ticket. Also on the circular table in the lobby there are forms for judging the cars, so please be sure and judge the cars. The announcement for the winners will be made tomorrow. On the door prize, you must be present to win, and those are going to be announced at the end of the event today. Also want to give a shout out. I don't know if Tom, are you in here? Tom Clark, are you in here? Tom Clark is in here, and I want to particularly thank Tom. Tom has his display just to the left in the center area of three incredible cars that he has molded from scratch. And the first one is an Oswego super modified that he is donating to the research center. So, Tom, thank you very much. Also want to point out to you that we are sponsoring a bus trip to the New York Art Show. It's on April 19th. Auto show. What did I say? Art show. Well, it's auto art. Thank you. The auto show in New York City on April 19th at the Javits Center. To make it convenient, we're going to have 3 bus pickup locations. It's going to pick up in Ithaca, Horseheads, and then in Binghamton. And for members of the Research Center, the cost for the round trip and admission is $90. If you're not yet a member, you can do so and save that extra money. But if not, it's $115 for non-members. And if you have any questions or more information, you can see Kip. Kip, where are you? Kip's back in the corner there. He's usually at the front desk. The deadline for this bus trip is March 22nd. So we're coming up on it towards the end of next week. So please join us for that trip. I'm also very pleased to announce that our Cameron Argetsinger Award Dinner is going to be held on August 31st this year. And this year we will be honoring Mario Andretti. Tickets for that dinner go on sale tomorrow. You can get it today. We have a very, very limited number of tickets available. Many of the tickets go to sponsors of the event. So if you're interested in tickets to the dinner honoring Mario Andretti on August 31st, please stop at the desk and let us know your interest. Continuing, there will be no center conversation in April, but please visit us when you're in town for the opening of WGI. That's opening weekend is April 8th and 9th. We will be open Saturday and Sunday from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. So please stop in, say hello. We are very excited about our May Center Conversation, which will be on May 6th. That conversation was selected and organized by our head archivist, Jenny Ambrose. I'm not sure if Jenny's in the room here. Jenny's in the room here. Off to my left, you're right over there. The program is going to be The Exciting Life of John C. Fitch, and it's going to be featured and presented by Larry Berman. Larry Berman and motorsports filmmaker Chris Suedo. Chris interviewed John Fitch in depth and did a film about his racing at the Bonneville Flats. Larry Berman is a longtime friend of John Fitch, biographer and historian, and has been helpful in having much of the John Fitch collection transferred to us here at the Research Center. So we're really excited that that program is going to be happening on May 6th. But wait, there's more. In addition, Kip Zeider has arranged to have on display the incredibly historic Fitch Phoenix will be in the lobby. One of a kind. So please join us on May 6th. Let's see, have I announced all the things that I need to announce? I think I have. Okay, so now I get to the real announcement. It is my pleasure to announce our two speakers today. First of all, I want to introduce Frank Spena, a native of Watkins Glen and now living in Elmira, and Dave Van Duzer of Horseheads. They're co-founders of the Slot Car Club of the Twin Tiers, and Frank is national champion in the professional slot car racing. They're going to talk about the history of slot car racing and the Slot Car Club, and Frank will share stories. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Frank Spena and Dave. You guys come on up, and then I'll step off.
All right. Thank you.
Set?
All set.
Okay. Woo.
My name's Dave Van Duzer, one of the founding members of the Slot Car Club of the Twin Tiers. I helped run the store with Frank and Dave Hendrickson for the last 12 years. I race slot cars. I raced slot cars in the 70s and 80s. As a child, I showed up at the shop once. I got hooked. The current owners wanted to retire or get out of the business, so I took it over with Frank and Dave Hendrickson. I'm just going to give a brief history on slot cars, and then Frank will tell you more about his racing career. I've never beaten Frank, but someday I will.
Keep dreaming.
Yeah. A slot car is a miniature race car that is guided by a blade or a pin device that sticks down from the bottom of the car's front end and follows a slot in the track surface. The car is powered by a small DC motor that gets its power from metal strips on either side of the track. The driver controls the speed of the car by the means of a pistol-shaped controller. The driver squeezes the trigger, the car moves forward. When the driver releases the trigger, the car brakes and slows down. By manipulating the controller, the driver can navigate corners and straights for the fastest lap times. Between 1961 and 1968 were considered the golden age of slot cars. At one point there was around 3,000 commercial slot car tracks and almost 200 in Europe. Manufacturers Scalextric with their 1/32 scale cars and Aurora Model Motoring, the HO line, pretty much set off the slot car craze. At one point, slot car racing was so popular they even televised events nationally. According to an independent survey taken in 1968, there were more slot car racing facilities than there were bowling alleys at the time in the U.S. Kids and adults would go to the local raceway, race on tracks. It would fill up an entire room. Or they would race in their basement of their friends' houses. The first most popular slot cars were the 1/32 scale cars that became popular in Europe, especially in England. Before World War II, most cars were wind-up cars that ran on a track. It wasn't until 1957 in England, Scalextric caused a sensation at toy fairs with their 1/32 scale cars running on rubber slotted tracks with pickup current from beneath the groove with a kind of a gimbal wheel. Power supplies by batteries, with each driver had their kind of own little on-off button to control the cars. By 1964, Scalextric was such a well-established company that they signed 1963 F1 driver Jim Clark to promote their brand. Other companies like Monogram, Revell, K&B, Parma, Strombecker also had their impact on the 1/32nd scale craze, slot car craze. With the 1/32nd scale cars, they struggled in the 80s and early 90s. And then Fly, a Spanish manufacturer, jumped in the 1/32nd scale market. They introduced cars with exceptional detail, nothing like we've really ever seen before. Now currently, we have some of the best slot cars that have ever been produced. Manufacturers like Slotted and NSR just took it to a whole new level. You can change out the motors, pinions, gears. You can go from inline, sidewinder. Just by changing a set screw, you can change gearing. You can do different pinions. It's just amazing what you can do now to really make slot cars race even faster. There's even digital slot car racing now, where you can basically have a two-lane track. You can have multiple cars just by hitting a switch. It'll tell the car to switch lanes. They have a little crossover piece. You go from one lane to the other. You can overtake and everything else. For the HO cars, it was by far the most popular in the U.S. It wasn't really even close. The most important slot car company in the HO was Aurora. In 1960, Aurora, a manufacturer of injected molded plastics, got into slot car racing. With the design of Derek Brand, who first developed a small motorized motor that was to be used with model railroads. The first cars he pretty much came out with was called the vibrator motor. Used a small miniature push rod that would supply and then cut off electrical power to a coil that would magnetize and demagnetize. Put that in for you, Dave Hendrickson. That caused the actuator reed to vibrate up and down, and so doing so turned a gear. These cars were finicky. They didn't really work too well. They're pretty problematic. There was a lot of complaints, so the same gentleman, Mr. Brand, replaced that with the legendary Thunderjet. Parts. The cars being small made it possible to easily set up a course in your family living room, which I did and Frank did, and everybody else, probably half the room did too. By 1965, Aurora had sold astoundingly 25 million of the little Thunderjet cars. I don't currently have all of them, but I got quite a few of them. And by far, they were the most popular slot car in history, dwarfing sales of just about any other manufacturer of cars, regardless of scale. The Thunderjet was such a brilliant design that the cars are still raced today. From the basic stock configuration to the faster Freestyle cars that Frank raced with their upgraded parts, these cars are still really relevant 50 years later. Aurora followed the success of the T-Jet with their larger AFX cars with their more detailed bodies to kind of compete with the manufacturer Tyco, came out with the better bodies. Then my personal favorite, the Magnet Traction, which I own a couple hundred. They came out after that. They had the magnets were lowered in the body, had a little bit stronger magnets. They would kind of grab the rail, give you a little more traction in the corners. And then the same gentleman, Brand, he came up with a G Plus car, kind of an inline design. At that point, it was quite a head of itself in design. And nowadays, you can go for HO racing, you can go from the T-Jets with no Ferraris, Nissans. He knows a lot more than I do. And the other class we do is a kind of a non-magnet class with different manufacturers. You can use NSR, Sliding Plus, and the slot is you use any gear, any motor from any of these manufacturers to kind of swap it up. And then our newest class, which we got into, is you basically take a model body and we have a chassis that's adjustable, and you mount the body on there and we can race it on our larger Carrera 124 scale track. For HO, we don't do as much as we do with T-Jets, but we do magnet traction, which we have a race at the end of the month. And we always have loaner cars, so if anybody's ever interested, we sit around, we eat Wendy's food, and we race slot cars pretty much. So, and now I'm going to turn this over to Frank, which I have known for quite a while, and he's going to speak about his pro racing career.
All right, slide
over.
Thank you, Dave. There. Okay, can everybody hear me okay? Yeah. Okay. So thank you, Dave. Thank you, everybody, for coming out today. When I was asked to speak today, I wasn't quite sure how I would start this, but I went to the track a couple weeks ago and ran into an old friend that I hadn't seen in a long time. And it dawned on me that the way to start with this was with people. So 20 years ago, I was driving down Grand Central Avenue in Horseheads one afternoon, and a sign caught my eye for slot car racing. And I went in and met a fellow by the name of Scott Walker. Scott was a very nice guy, but clearly he was very crazy, because somebody has to be crazy to open a slot car shop and think it would survive in Horseheads, New York. So ultimately, Scott's track, which was Pocket Rocket Raceway, it didn't survive. Financially, it failed, which was unfortunate but not unexpected. Like Dave talked about, slot car racing had peaked in the 60s, and a lot of commercial tracks failed over the years. But it's important to look at the big picture. And so 20 years later, there's still slot car racing taking place and open to the public in the same place at 2117 Grand Central Avenue in Horseheads. 20 years later, the racing that takes place there is still recognized throughout the slot car community as some of the best slot car racing anywhere. 20 years later, Frank Spena and Dave Van Duzer are on stage speaking about slot car racing at the International Motor Racing Research Center.
You would have thought that.
Yeah, really. So the big picture is that while PRR failed financially, what Scott began has made an enormous difference in many people's lives. And one of those lives is mine, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about my slot car racing adventure, which would have never happened without Scott Walker and some other people like Dave Van Duzer and Dave Hendrickson down in the audience. So I'm going to take a little step back first, talk about two other people. My mom and dad are both here in the audience today. So when I was little, I started playing with slot cars when I was about 3. Dad liked slot cars, and my parents set up a little figure 8 for me in the living room, and I would spend hours playing with that track. I loved the look of the speed of the cars, the look of the cars, loved having control of the cars. I loved the smell. Anybody remember when they were kids have slot cars and what it smelled like when the cars got hot and everything? That's like a great smell, right? Probably really bad for us, but we all love that smell.
If it was a perfume, it would have been attracted you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We're actually going to work on the Slot Car Club of the Twin Tiers cologne, right? We should do that, yeah.
Attract women.
Yeah, I'm sure it must, yeah. That's why there's always women at the slot car.
My wife.
Track, yeah.
Bridget.
Yeah.
Your mom.
Yeah.
Well.
Yeah, it's probably, that's about right, yeah, okay. So, yeah. Thanks, Bridget. So my parents always supported me in my slot car racing, and even my great-grandmother Rosie bought me a race set for Christmas one year. So I was always encouraged, and as I got older and understood more about the cars, I got a lot better. I stopped racing slot cars for a while and did some one-to-one racing. So I raced some Formula 2000 cars. I went through the Berto Roos Grand Prix Racing School, did some drag racing, some SCCA Solo 2. And so when I saw this sign for Pocket Rocket Raceway, I hadn't raced slot cars for about 5 years. And again, that was in 1997. So after meeting with Scott, I went in there, started racing with these guys. I had these cars in my basement. I thought, let's go have some fun with these cars, right? Nobody in the area really knew much about me, so it was kind of a little bit of a surprise when I started winning a lot of the races. And the second 2 series of championships we had, they were both 20 races in each series. And one series I won 17 out of 20. The other series I won 18 out of 20. And so Scott approached me to represent Pocket Rocket Raceway and start going to professional slot car races. And the idea was twofold. One, obviously to promote Pocket Rocket Raceway, but also to go to the pro races, learn about what they were doing, and bring it back to Pocket Rocket Raceway and teach everybody else who was racing there how to race slot cars, how to prepare the cars to advance the whole program. That was really a new concept to me because we're racing, we're always competitive, and nobody really wanted to tell each other their secrets. So it was a very, very different approach, but it was a chance to race slot cars professionally. I wasn't going to turn it down. And over the years, that's turned out to be actually a winning strategy, and I think that's probably the biggest reason why we're still having races after all these years. So I went to my first pro race in 1998. It was down in Moon, Pennsylvania, a suburb of Pittsburgh, near the Pittsburgh airport. Thought it was going to be pretty competitive. We spent $125 to prepare a super stock car, and I had never spent more than $30 on a slot car before. So, here I'm winning all these races locally, and we'll put all this money into this car, and I'm thinking we're going to go down there and be very competitive. But as soon as I walked in the door, I realized this is a whole different world. So if you see this, this box that I put up here on the stage, this is a race box. So at the time, my race box was about a quarter that size. But when I walked in the room, everybody there's probably about 35 people racing, and it's kids from age probably about 12 and up to guys in their 60s. Everybody had a race box that size. So you're talking about HO scale cars. Most guys probably had 6 or 7 cars in the box. The rest of it was all parts. So to give you some idea, Pocket Rocket Raceway at the time had an inventory of probably about $1,200 for the entire shop. And those boxes, with their backup setups and spare parts, they were running about $3,000 to $5,000 to be prepared for these races. So I knew right away, I'm a little bit out of my depth here. They also had controllers that were very unusual. So I went there with a standard commercial controller, a Parma Econo, about $20. There was a controller called an Omni. I'd read about Omnis. I had never seen one before. Electronic controllers, all these adjustments. They were $200 controllers. And everybody else in the room had Omnis. You had little kids walking around with $200 Omnis. I was floored. So came 14th in that first race. Definitely an eye-opener, but learned a lot. And over the next couple of years, kept racing. This is magnet car racing now too. These cars were very fast. Learned about the cars, tried to bring the information back to Pocket Rocket, but it really wasn't taking off too well. The magnet car racing wasn't really picking up at Pocket Rocket. It was, as you can tell from how serious people were spending money to do that, it was a pretty serious investment to get involved. And I think it's also true that the racers were probably a little bit more serious than we really wanted to be for our slot car racing. And to give you some idea, at that first race, there were 2 things that kind of stuck in my mind about what was going on. And the first thing was we were in a conference room. There's big glass windows along this conference room in this hotel. And it got pretty warm in there at some point, and somebody opened a couple of windows. To me, it's a natural thing to do. But in a matter of a few minutes, there was a big fight that broke out over the fact that the windows were opened. And I was kind of floored by that. I really didn't know what was going on. So I asked another fellow, why are they having this really heated argument over windows? And what it comes down to is that HO scale slot cars with magnets are really sensitive to setup. And all those spare parts that people had in those race boxes were to change that. And where you change the ride height of an HO scale slot car is through tire diameter. And anytime the temperature changes, the height of the rails change in the racetrack, and you have to change your tire setup. So some of these guys had had their setups down, they were going really fast, windows gets opened, their setups go right out the window, literally. So that's why these guys were fighting over this. They're talking about 2,000 increments and adjustments in tire diameter. So in between the tire diameter and then different compounds of tires, different compounds of sponge, which goes underneath the silicone, which is on the tire. So you have literally an infinite number of car setups potentially for these cars, and gearing setups on top of that. And the axles have to be built to be swapped in and out of the cars. So you could see why they were a little bit upset. But again, I thought it was a bit over the top. The other thing that happened at that race, which told me how serious these guys were, I was standing at the track during practice, and 4 very attractive young ladies go walking across the front of our glass windows, right? And it was pretty obvious they had to be coming here because there's nothing else in that direction. But it was also pretty obvious they were all dressed up. They were part of a wedding party. So they obviously were lost as well. But me, this is my first professional slot car race, you know, and I'm having a little fun with it. So I see these girls walking, and I'm like, all right, here come the slot car groupies. So now you're out in the audience, you're all laughing. I figured I'd get a few chuckles, right? All I got were these glares from everybody at the track. It was like, what is wrong with that guy, you know? So from that point on, I knew these guys are a little bit different, you know? But I stuck that in my mind as well. And as I got to be one of the top guys myself, I kind of used that, you know, that mentality. I could kind of use that against them because they were so intense about their racing that it wouldn't take much to kind of psych them out and put them over the edge. So put that to good use. And if you ever come race at our club, by the way, we're not that serious. We have a lot of fun. Yeah. Yeah, just look at Dave and tell we're not that serious. No, I'm kidding, Dave. So the magnet racing really wasn't going anywhere with Pocket Rocket Raceway. But about that time in the late 90s, the internet's coming on. And what you had all these groups that were racing Thunderjets in their basements. And so they weren't at pro level, but there was a lot of Thunderjet racing going on, and they started to connect with each other through the internet. So Scott Walker and I both were starting to see this happening on the internet, and Scott said, hey, we need to have a Thunderjet race. Let's have a big Thunderjet race. So we came up with this concept. Scott liked modifieds, the old dirt modifieds. And so we had these 1941 Willys hot rod coupe bodies, and we would chop the fenders off of them, and we'd race them that way. And so we came up with this race called the Snowball 500. So the Snowball was really unusual in that people were not racing T-Jets for that length of race. So the idea of a 500-lap final for T-Jets with these modified bodies, it really started catching on, and we started realizing there's going to be a lot of people that are going to show up to this race. And we had people come from all over central New York. We had put out press releases just on a whim. Really didn't think we'd get much out of it. But as it turned out, WENY TV showed up. And Josh, if you could play this video.
Or celebrate somewhere where you can spend the night. Well, in spite of the snow today, racers are competing in the snow.
It's just like any other kind of competition. Everybody's here to win. We're all having a good time, but when it comes right down to it, everybody wants to win. And Down near the end, it gets serious.
Frank Spena races HO scale slot cars professionally. Today at Pocket Rocket Raceway, his home track, the Snowball 500. And everybody has him in their sights.
Our goal is to beat Frank. That's the main thing here. Frank has been known to do a few things underhanded every now and then.
Scott Walker owns the track and sponsors Frank professionally. Even he is calling in reinforcements.
And who's the favorite? Frank. Our goal here today is to beat Frank. We got guys coming from Syracuse, Moravia, Sayre, just to beat Frank.
Last time I was here for a big race, Frank's car burned up twice, and I beat him by over 24 laps, so.
We were here till 1 o'clock in the morning last night working on race cars. Scott and I just getting them to go as fast as we can.
After it's all done and Frank wins, we take him out back and break his kneecaps.
If Frank's in the lead as the finish line draws near, he's not scared. He has an exit strategy.
Yeah, everything's going to be packed up and ready to go before the race. And you see I'm a pretty skinny guy. I can move pretty fast. And I'll be gone.
I parked behind you so you can't get out.
From Horseheads, Brian James, News Channel 36.
And just to let you know, the favorite, Frank Spena, did in fact win today's race.
So, as you can see, we had a little fun with that. We were very fortunate. Brian James, who did the news piece there, he really got into it and did a great job doing that video and having fun with us. We didn't know what direction he was going with until we actually saw the clip, and which you couldn't hear when I was laughing at the end. I talked about getting out of there pretty fast. One of the guys in the background said, "Oh, I parked behind you." So a couple of things that are important came out of that, and one was this newscast. This went out to one of the HO scale slot car magazines that were on the internet, and among the HO world, it kind of went viral. So even several years later, I was known as the Snowball 500 champion wherever I went. Even went out to race to California, everybody asked me about this race, even after I'd won the national championship. The second thing that it did was the car that I used in the race. Most of my cars were always either white with black stripes or black with white stripes after my racing helmet. And when I decided to jump into this race, because I really wasn't a T-Jet racer, I was a magnet car guy. T-Jets were slow, and I really wasn't that interested in them. And by the time I decided to jump into the race, there's only one body left on the shelf, and it was purple. And I was like, oh my God, I got to race a purple car. But I decided if I'm going to race a purple car, I'm going to have a little fun with it. So at the time, there was a kids show by Barney the dinosaur. So you got this guy in a big purple dinosaur suit, running around with these kids. So I took the car, I chopped the fenders like you normally would, but I left the headlights on the car, and I left the grill on the car. And like some of you are familiar with from vintage racing, you see some of the bug eye sprites, they put little dimples on the inside of headlights so it looks like it's cross-eyed. So I did that on headlights of my car. And then for the grill, I put like a World War II fighter plane style shark's teeth on it. And so I called it Rabid Barney. And it took off. So every place I ever went to race after that, even though the car wasn't legal at any of those places, everybody always wanted to see Rabid Barney. And so Rabid Barney I have on display today over at the center. So those two things really put Pocket Rocket Raceway on the map nationally for slot car racing, and put me on the map nationally for slot car racing. And even at the time, I still considered myself to be a magnet car racer, but instantly, to everybody else, I was a T-Jet guy. And along with that, with the T-Jets coming up like they were, which is really, when you think about it, really unusual. Dave talked about how prolific they were, how many cars were produced by Aurora, and how popular they were. So this is 30, 40 years later. These cars are just gaining enormous popularity and starting to overtake the magnet car racing that was taking place. And the United States HO Club recognized this and formed a world championship. The world championship was based on points from all the major T-Jet races throughout really the US. There really weren't any major races anyplace else, but they still called it a world championship. With Pocket Rocket's new reputation, several of our races counted towards the world championship. I happened to win all those races, and so as the season wound down, which is late 2001, I became the 2001 United States HO Club World Champion for T-Jets, which again really enhanced our reputation. It's a little bit of an oddity because reality was there were better racers, better T-Jet racers in California and Kansas City, but they were constantly racing each other and beating each other. They weren't scoring a lot of points because they're knocking each other down. So I kind of fell into the World Championship. So I don't, even though it's a World Championship, I don't rate it as highly as the National Championships, which I won later on. So in 2001, probably about a month after being crowned World Champion, I went to my first National Championship for T-Jets. And it was really a bit of a struggle. The setups that we had on the cars really didn't work that well. And actually, I should skip this ahead. This is, I meant to show this before, I apologize. There's Rabbit Barney with the cross-eyes and the teeth. And this was the 10th anniversary of the Snowball 500. And so, and then this is that 10th anniversary race. I won the first 6 Snowball 500s, and at that time I kind of retired from HO racing, but when I came back for the 10th, I was like, oh, I got to come back and try to win the 10th one, and I did. So that's the winning car. The guys that won were from a team called BRP. And BRP was out of Virginia Beach. BRP stood for Bowman Racing Products. And Tom Bowman was actually the inventor of the magnetic slot car. He was the first person to race magnet cars. And he won the national championship back in the early 70s with his magnet car. But he had gone back to T-Jet racing. He liked the cars that slid around a little more. And he started making bodies and parts for the T-Jets. And they were just on another level from the cars that we were racing. And so even though I lost the national championship in 2001, it was really important for what I learned. And it really led to a connection with BRP. And it started racing BRP bodies through the rest of 2001 and working on these racing bodies that they were producing. At the end of 2001, Tom Bowman called me up, said, hey, I'm going to go be racing in a race in New Jersey. Come down and race with us. So I went down to this race in New Jersey, a little bit different rules from what we were used to. So again, setup-wise, I struggled. The cars really didn't have it. I came home in 14th place out of about 30 guys. But I put on a good show. The car was sliding around a lot, and I was able to show off my car control. I knew I wasn't going to win, so I had fun with it. And everybody enjoyed watching me drive that way. Well, after the race, Tom took me aside and he said, the reason I wanted you to come down is this race was a tryout. I wanted, to join Team Wizard, the factory team. And I said, well, I guess I didn't do very good then, huh? And but Tom was actually impressed. He said, no, he said, we can supply you with good cars. You don't have to worry about that. We need you to drive. So that was perfect for me. in magnet car racing, and I'd always struggled to beat the factory teams. I was always independent. Factory guys had all the big setups, and couldn't run with them. Now I was going to be on Wizard's factory T-Jet team. And as part of that, Tom Bowman was actually, even though he ran BRP, he was the team captain for Wizard's T-Jet team. So it also made me a direct connection with Tom's company. He'd been watching me win all these races with his racing bodies. And so we started doing an R&D arrangement. And out of that came this car here. This is a Chrysler Crossfire. And if you can see, it's got running boards on it and fender flares. So the first Crossfire that Tom made didn't have any of those things. But he also made at the same time a Mini Cooper that did have those things. And I said, Tom, if we make a Crossfire with those types of setups on it, we could really have something here. And so he started sending me different bodies, and I would work on them and lighten them up and mold them certain ways. And then I would send the information back to Tom, and we developed this car. And there was actually one iteration of the Crossfire that came after this, which I actually thought at one time was actually going to cost me the national championship, because I did the final iteration, sent it back to BRP. When they showed up at the national championships, I had this car. They had the new cars, but they only had enough for their direct team from Virginia Beach. So I was going to be racing against the better development that I came up with. But as it turned out, it was a very topsy-turvy race. But in the end, I came away with the national championship. So my first national championship for Pocket Rocket Raceway, and that's the Chrysler Crossfire. It was a very tough race. Actually, Haas Phoenix, who you saw in the video, was actually running for Pocket Rocket Raceway also at that race, and he came home in second. So we had a 1-2 for Pocket Rocket at the Nationals. Defending national champion Don Saltow, who I'd been really impressed with in 2001, and beat him head-to-head. He came home third. And part of the reason why I struggled in that race was Don actually took me out a couple of times. So I learned a lot from that as well, and learned a lot about lane choice and car setup in that race, which really affected the races on down the line. So a very, very important race for me. At the end of 2002, we went to the New Jersey Shootout. So this is the same group that I raced with in New Jersey, where I took 14th place the fall before. And we went back as part of Team Wizard, factory racing team. The Shootout is really more of a team event. There's individual portions to it, but the really big prize is the team portion. And it was myself, Tom Bowman, Jerry Schmoyer, and Haas Phoenix. We were Team Wizard. And the New Jersey guys kind of looked down their nose at us a little bit. I was coming in as the national champion, but I'd been beaten pretty soundly when I raced with them the year before. And none of the New Jersey guys had gone to the national championships. So they figured because they weren't there, it really wasn't a completely legitimate national championship, and we really weren't that good. But we really showed up with a strong team. We completely dominated the entire event. I won the individual laps award. I won the individual points award. And then I led the team to the team's championship, which was Team Wizard's first big T-Jet prize. So these are the four of the cars that we ran. The two cars in the middle are my personal cars. And then the two on the outside were cars that were provided by BRP and Wizard. Tom Bowman was he was a racer, so he liked the history of auto racing. So he liked the Gulf colors. And these are BRP GT40s, which kind of along with the same concept as the Crossfire. We took a GT40 body, added the piece in the nose to give it some nose weight, added the fender flares and the side pods. And so you understand it, at the rules for this class, you could not add weight to the car. So the bodies, we would make the bodies heavy and have all this stuff on the body, and then you would take a Dremel tool and carve the body out the way you wanted it to. And that's how you produced a balance in the car and got the weight where you needed it to be for the chassis. It was a totally new concept. Nobody else was doing this. And it was very successful. And eventually it was banned. Nobody wanted to race against us anymore. But the cars were really revolutionary, and really proud of how they ran. So as those years went on, we just kept going from strength to strength and winning a lot of races. So here's kind of a compilation of some things. This is the T-Jet 40th anniversary. So this would be 2003. So this would have been for skinny tire T-Jets, which were the stock wheels. They're tiny little wheels, and they slide all over the place, and they don't go very fast, but they're hard to drive. And actually drove a backup car, Haas Phoenix's backup car, and won the race with that. And that's Scott Walker. He's kind of doing the Wilson from Home Improvement thing there. You can't see the bottom of his face, but that's his son, Alan, there. So then this is the 2002 National Championships that I just talked about. Or no, I'm sorry, this is 2004. Went back, and skipped 2003 National Championship, and went back in 2004. Won again. That was a tough race. This is much more competition than in 2002. The prize for 2004 was the actual racetrack. So it was like a $1,500 racetrack. Whoever won the race got to take it home with them. It was a beautiful routed track. It was a terrible design. The actual shape and the flow of the racetrack, you couldn't get a good rhythm on the track. It's very difficult to drive. But that really paid off because it suited my driving style. Some of the other guys had faster cars, but they couldn't drive with me on that track. And so won the Nats again in 2004. And another strong showing from our club, Dave Hendrickson, took 4th place in that race as well. So we come down here. This is 2003. This plaque here is from the World Championship in 2003. Another very important race. Actually drove out to Las Vegas, which was kind of a fun adventure. Got my '69 Chevy, loaded up my slot car stuff, and I drove all the way out to Vegas to race in the World Championships, which was where they were that year. Pretty disappointing in the end. I really had a shot to win the race, but had some problems with the car setup going into the final. The final was actually delayed. So it was going to be televised. This is part of a big toy show, and HGTV was going to come by and televise the race. The camera crew was late showing up. And what happened was big toy show. You have all these people walking around. It was in the basement of the Venetian Motel. And a concrete floor. And the time that the camera crew took to get there, the track got really dusty. And we didn't realize this until we started the race. My car was set up for a tight track with a lot of grip. There was no grip whatsoever. By the end of the first segment, I was 7 laps behind in 4th place. I was like 5 laps out of 3rd, just completely out in the wilderness. The car just would not work. As the race went on, started the second segment, the track started to get clean, and I started coming back. And really had one of the best drives of my life. Coming back, came all the way back to 2nd place. I couldn't get back to the lead, but I did unlap myself twice from the eventual world champion. But it taught me a lot. This race really raised my driving level to the next level, because I ran qualifying laps for 3/4 of the race, just on the absolute limit, nonstop, which nobody was doing at the time. I'd never done it before. But after the race, people coming up to me, like looking at me like I had 4 heads, and tell me I've never seen anything like that before. Here I'm thinking I lost the race. What's it matter? But as I thought about it, I realized what they were talking about and what I had done. And from then on, that's how I drove. I tried to drive qualifying laps for the entire race. In the next few years, I came to dominate T-Jet racing because of that. And part of that as well, we went to the next year, this was in October. In February, I went to the East Coast Championships. And it was myself, Haas Phoenix, and Dave Hendrickson, again from our club, went out there. We swept first, second, and third. And again, pushing the whole way, the entire race, dominated the race. And part of what allowed me to do that actually was Dave Hendrickson. Dave was, I talk about how people are important in this whole puzzle. Dave came into Pocket Rocket Raceway probably about 2002, Dave, 2003? And he was very good right from the start and really started pushing me. I had to get better to keep in front of Dave. And so what happened when we started going to these national championship races, where in the past, I was racing against some good guys, but you're at a different level when you go to the nationals. Well, now at Pocket Rocket Raceway, we are at national level. So Dave was national level, and all I could do to beat Dave week in and week out. So when we go to the national championships, we're going against the best guys anywhere, and they weren't as much of a competition as Dave was for me. So they got that mindset and got used to it. So when you go to the nationals, it's no surprise. You're not up against something you've never seen before. And that really paid off, I think, for both of us. So in 2006, I was getting ready to actually stop T-Jet racing. I've been doing it pro for a while, and it's a lot to maintain that level of competition. And I wasn't even going to go to the nationals. Dave talked me into going back, and glad that I did. Wound up with my third national championship. Another great day for our club. By this point, they're calling us the Red Storm, because this is actually my racing shirt. This is the Pocket Rocket shirt we all wore when we went to the races. And so they knew when they saw us coming, they were in trouble, pretty much. And at that race, Ryan Hendrickson, who's Dave's son, he qualified on pole. I qualified second, Dave qualified third. In the finals, I was first, Dave was second, Ryan was third. So from little old Horseheads, New York, we swept the podium at the national championships. To top that off, his other son, Kevin, took 9th, and Dave Van Duzer in his first national championship took 10th. So we had 5 out of the top 10 places coming out of our little shop in Horseheads, which was really fantastic. Good job, Dave.
10th place.
In 10th place. There you go. Yeah. Don't get used to it.
Okay, yeah.
So at the end of part of this story, end of 2005, or partway through 2005, I should say, end of 2004, Pocket Rocket Raceway was getting ready to close. Again, it's just not feasible financially to maintain a slot car track, a commercial slot car track, especially in a small area like Elmira and Horseheads. So both Dave Van Duzer and Dave Hendrickson approached me separately about buying Pocket Rocket Raceway. And I told them both they were nuts. I was like, I don't want nothing to do with it. I go, but you need to talk to the other Dave. And so they got together, and then they double teamed me.
Yes.
And said, let's buy Pocket Rocket Raceway, let's keep it going. I said, well, I really don't think we should do a business, but if we reopen it as a club, I'm in. We'll do it. And so that's what we did. So we started it. This is our logo over here, the Slot Car Club of the Twin Tiers. And that was actually done by Diane Burrows, an artist out of Corning, New York, did that for us. And so obviously, we being as close to the Pennsylvania border as we are, we like to have guys come up from Pennsylvania race with us. So that's why we call it the Twin Tiers, the Club of the Twin Tiers. We also kind of wanted to be an homage to Scott Walker. So the acronym spells out Scott, even though it's not correctly spelled. It sounds like Scott, so that's why we did it.
I never noticed that.
You never noticed
No,
that, Dave?
no.
You just catching on?
Yeah.
So this is one of my favorite races that we used to hold the 8 hours of Horseheads. These are for 1/24th scale Carrera cars, and they had working head and tail lights. And we used to draw guys from quite a ways over this, including Tom Gunchanan is in the audience. He raced with us several times in the 8 hours. And these races were an absolute blast. 4 hours in daylight, 4 hours in darkness. We'd shut the lights off in the shop, race in the dark, and had fantastic races. This particular year, 2006, came down to a battle between our team, which Dave was a part of. That's Dave there.
Young guy there.
Yeah, me. As Tyler Reed, and then Ryan Hendrickson. And we were up against Dave Hendrickson's team, and it came down to the dying minute. So after 8 hours, it came down to the last couple minutes. There was a pass for the lead right at the end to win the race, and we pulled it off. And I think it's probably about the only time that you and I were actually on the same team.
Teammates with me. I've never been a teammate with Dave Hendrickson for anything either.
Yeah, well, I learned my lesson. That was the one and only. Yeah. No, again.
Yeah.
But we did. We had a great time, and that was a lot of fun. We even had a fog machine the one year, so we were racing through the mist. That wound up causing a lot of problems. There was like fallout from the oil in the fog machine, and it made a mess of the racetrack. But
it wasn't well thought out. No.
No.
But Tom still showed up, so you know.
Yeah, he still came back. Yeah. Those crazy guys from Horseheads.
Yeah.
So end of 2006, like I said, I was pretty much ready to retire from professional racing. We were trying to get our club going, and we were really well known for racing Thunderjets, HO scale. Nobody knew we raced 132nd scale. We had a really good 132nd program. Yep. So I saw this series that was going to be starting. I saw it on the internet, and they had rules that were very similar to the rules we were racing in one of our classes. So they were enduro races, two-man teams. So I said, hey, let's jump into this. So this was the 2007 SRO, which is the Slot Racers of Ontario. They sanctioned it. Canadian American Challenge. So 4-race series, 2 races in the US, 2 races in Canada. And of all the championships I won, this was my favorite championship. This was just a really good time. The first race was up in Brampton, Ontario, and we drove up there. We didn't know what the track looked like. When we got there, we were pretty disappointed because the track had these squeeze sections in it. And we were like, what kind of nuts are these guys to race with squeeze sections? That's like for little kids to beat up their race cars, right? But once we started running on the track, we realized that the track was designed so that you had to actually get a run off a corner and outbrake a guy to get past him, just like driving a real race car. So it was absolutely fantastic. So that was the first thing. We fell in love with this racetrack. The second thing was that they changed the rules on us when we got there, which really ticked us off. And so at that race, we came home in 4th place. But we walked out of there on the drive home. We said, we are going to win this championship. And Dave and I both went home and busted our butts for the rest of this championship. So I ordered parts from all over the world. At one point, had Special Motors flown in from Italy. Dave started making his own tires. He bought all these resins, different resins, and started molding tires. So we had stuff that nobody else had. And that first race, just to give you some idea, that first race up in Canada, we did not have tires that would work well on that track. Didn't have a car that would work well on that track because, again, they changed the rules for us. It wasn't what we expected when we got there. We came home in 4th place, 25 laps down from the leader in a 2-hour enduro. The second race, round 2, was at our home track. And not only was our home track, we also kind of brought in some reinforcements. So we talked Tom Gunshannon and some of his friends to come up from Pennsylvania, and we helped some of our local teams out. So the idea being we wanted to get teams to finish between us and the Canadian team that was leading the championship so we could gain points on them. And it worked out. We won the race. We were 85 laps in the lead. We were 225 laps ahead of the Canadians in 2 hours. Wow. And they were back in 5th place. So a couple of our local teams and Tom Gunshannon's team from Pennsylvania, they all finished ahead of the Canadians. And so suddenly we've got a 1 point, we went from being buried in the points to having a 1 point lead. Went back to their track, which was called Piper's Glen. And we went back there, and I really wanted to win a race on that track, 'cause I loved that track. We went back there, broke the track record, broke the race record, beat them by 10 laps. They'd never been beaten on their home track. We beat them by 10 laps on their home track, put us further ahead in the championship. Last race of the season was at Niagara Falls, New York. Went there. We really went all out for that race. We did some kind of secret testing up there, which nobody really found out about. There were people talking about it. Knew somebody had been there and broken the track record in practice, but nobody knew who it was. So Dave and I had taken a day off from work, went up there, because it's a full hobby shop. They're open regular hours. We went up there, did our testing during the day, and got out of there before anybody would get out of work and come in at night. And we learned a lot about the car. And when we came back for the race, we had the setup nailed. And we crushed the track record up there, crushed them in the race. It was a 185-foot track, running footage. And at the end of the race, we'd won by 35 laps. So it was just, we were in completely a different zip code. It was unreal. And even after the race, the Canadian team came up to me and he said, "We've just never seen anything like you guys before." You know, of course, the one thing that's funny about slot car racing is the 1/32 scale guys don't pay attention to HO. HO guys don't pay attention to 1/32. So I'm a 3-time national champion, but the 1/32 guys never heard of me. They had no idea they were going up against, guys who were really fast. So it was a big surprise for them. And especially the thing I talked about running qualifying laps, like the whole race. Dave and I could both do that. They couldn't even come close to touching that. So there's a close-up of our cars. Ryan did join us. He joined us for the first race, but after that he was on a different team with his brother. This is the car. This is an NSR Mosler. The Mosler is an American-made street car, supercar. And they were Chevy powered, and anybody knows me, I'm a Chevy guy, so it was fun for me to race something that represented a Chevy powered car. And the NSR company is an Italian company, and the cars were actually made in Italy. They weren't made in China. So very high quality, very well designed, well engineered race cars. We talked about the rules there. So I know Dave would get a chuckle out of this. So one of the things that they really harped on with the Canadian teams is that we had what's called a DeFalco controller, which is an electronic controller. And they used more simplistic controllers. And they thought that what they really thought was giving us an advantage was that these controllers somehow had traction control. That our cars were actually able to cut power when they started to slip the tires, which was just really unreal. And part of when we went back to their track for round 3, the first thing I did in practice was I took one of their controllers out and I broke the track record with their controller on their track to prove that it's not the controllers. And they finally let it go. But Dave came up with these stickers. So at the last race of the season, all the American teams, we handed out all these stickers. So we had trigger finger traction control stickers all over the place.
I still have it in my box.
Yeah. So a little fun with that. So then this is, I'll show you this too. This is, can you help me scoot that out of there? Can you get that?
Spena, wait.
You want to hold it? Yeah. Thanks, Spena. So this is, we didn't actually get a trophy for winning the Can-Am Championship. So I had the same artist who did our logo, I had her do up a caricature as Dave and I. That's kind of, I got a copy for Dave as well. That was our trophy for winning the Can-Am Championship. That was pretty neat. Good job, Dave.
Thank you.
So this is actually Piper's Glen. So I told the fellow when he left his track there in 2007 that if he ever wanted to sell the track, let me know. I wanted that racetrack. And a couple years later, well, it was probably about 3 years later, I guess. I'm in the shop, and Dave here says to me, hey, did you hear Piper's Glen's on the internet for sale? I was like, you're kidding me. So I ran home. I didn't even look for the advertisement. I shot the guy an email, heard it's for sale. What do you want? I want the track. We went back and forth for several days, and eventually I bought the racetrack. We drove up to Canada. We actually cut the track in half right here, loaded it in a pickup truck, and tarped it down, took it back here, put it back together, fixed it up. And so now Piper's Glen is now at our shop in Horseheads, New York. And the name itself is interesting. I don't know if any of you watch, there's a show by Samantha Bee hosts, it's her show, I guess I should say, yeah, on CNN. And her daughter is Piper. Her father is the guy who built this track. So he named the track after his granddaughter, Piper. And then the Glen part, I guess he named after some racetrack down here or something. I'm not really sure. Yeah. The racetrack? Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's what I heard. Yeah, yeah. So, but yeah, so he loved Watkins Glen, loved coming to the Grand Prix down here back in the 70s. So when he built the track, he named it Piper's Glen. And you can see here, these are the squeeze sections that I talked about. So you've got to come off this hairpin corner, you've got to get a launch here. And you've got to get a better launch than your opponent, and you've got to outbrake them here. And if you don't, bad things happen. And you can rub fenders. There's places where you can go side by side, and there's a lot of beating and banging on the track. And then there's a section over here. This is always my favorite section here. If you Dave's Belly, yeah, no, not Dave's Belly. So I knew you were up here for a reason.
Yeah.
But if you can pull off a pass, it's really difficult. But there's a squeeze right here, and then it opens up there, and then there's a squeeze again there. And if you are really quick, you can make a pass there. And when we went up for the second race up there in Canada, I had figured that out, and I was making passes when I was lapping the Canadian team. I was passing them there. It was freaking them out. The first time they thought I got lucky. The second and third time they realized I had it figured out. But this is just a blast of a racetrack to race on. That's Piper's Glen. And this is, if you notice, this is too far, sorry. This is copper tape. So even if you have magnets in your car, you're not going to get any magnetic traction on this racetrack. So this is, do you want to talk about this is your baby.
It was a hot summer night. I saw this on eBay. My wife was already sleeping, so I went upstairs and said, honey. I got hold of Dave Hendrickson, and he just got a bonus check, and then, your wife's not here, right, Dave? Okay. And I just had to have this. So I went upstairs. My wife was sleeping. I said, honey. And she said, okay. I ran downstairs, and Dave said, okay. So I contacted the guy, and we negotiated for whatever he wanted I was going to pay. But we negotiated for a while. It was out in Wisconsin. We built a big box in the back of my pickup truck, and I went out and got it. Yeah, it was, I had the best wife in the world, my wife Deirdre. I mean, anybody who puts up with this will put up with anything. Yeah. So, I mean, it's a great HO track. It was a hell of a deal. But
This track was designed by a fellow by the name of Brad Bowman. Brad was a race engineer, mostly in the Formula Atlantic series, but also engineered our Landix car in the early days with IRL. So Brad understood road racing. And these Bowman tracks, there's very few on the East Coast, especially when we bought this. I think we were probably the only one open to the public on the East Coast. And I first raced on a Bowman track when I went out to California racing with Team Wizard in 2002. And I was just floored. Like, these tracks are just amazing. The flow, the rhythm, because he understands racing, what a racetrack should feel like. And so for us to get our hands on a Bowman, normally this is like an $8,000 racetrack if you were to buy it new.
I don't think I told my wife how much I spent for it, so let's...
Okay. We didn't spend, it wasn't that much anyway.
Yeah, it was like $50, I think.
Yeah, something like that. But this was actually the 2005 Hopra National Championship track, but it was flat. There was no elevation change except for the crossover bridge. And so when we bought it, we're like, we're road racers, it can't be flat. So Dave Hendrickson and I designed the elevation. It's a little bit hard to see on the screen here, but there's a lot of elevation in this track. And then Dave Van Duzer and Larry Weaver, who's here today, they did all the landscaping. And it came out really nice. And I raced all over the country and in Canada, and of all the tracks I've raced on in HO scale, this was the third best I've ever been on. This is really a fantastic racetrack. It was really cool to have it right here in our shop. This is the same track from a different angle. You see the work that Dave and Larry did. These are flowers, basically in scale, spelling out our logo. They did the press tower, a pit lane, crossover bridge, victory circle. This is shale. It's a little bit hard to see on the picture here as well, but it's done up as shale. So it's really a really nice track. This is one of our more recent races. So we still get a lot of companies sponsoring our races. So this is, you want to talk about this one?
This was done by Quick Slicks. They're a company in, I think, Connecticut. They're really nice guys. They give us a lot of race prizes. It's kind of a small company. But in this one, you've got my son, who is 17, me, who is, I'm taking the photo, then my father at the far end, who just turned 80. So, I mean, it was just, for all ages, race with your dad and your child. It was pretty cool. Plus the other kid, then the next my dad is my other somehow adopted child. So, and it was it was a great supplier. It was a fun race. We got all ages, and it was.
This shows that we have a great crew of racers, and like Dave talked about, it's really a family type of thing, and it all comes back to people again. This is our Carrera track, 1/24th and 1/32nd scale. They can run either scale. This is the track that the 8 Hours of Horseheads was always held on. Nice big long straightaway on this one. It's a little more simple design, but it's still a lot of fun to race on. And the S's back in, the S's back in here are pretty tricky, but this part here is almost like a big oval, big sweeping corner coming out of the last corner onto the main straightaway. This is Scale Auto Racing magazine, and this is a cover shot. We made the cover. This is a Trans Am race, and that's coming down the hill on our Carrera track. So I had to get this in there. It was pretty cool. We made the cover of the national magazine. We've been in the magazine quite a few times, but this is the only time we ever made the cover. So this, with my pro racing, it really led to a lot of interesting adventures, and this was one of the more interesting ones. At the end of 06, when I told a lot of my sponsors I was going to be stopping at the end of the year, I was approached by a fellow by the name of Ron Bernstein. And Ron was a HO fanatic, and particularly with brass cars. Ron had made a fortune on the internet with different websites, and he bought the Riggin name. Riggin had got out of business in the 70s. He bought the Riggin name. He tracked down all the molds and everything that was used to make Riggin cars, and he had all these things. He started making Riggin cars again, but they weren't doing very well. They weren't selling, and so he approached me, being the T-Jet champion, asked if I would drive his cars in some races. And so both Dave Hendrickson and I went down to New Jersey to race in what's called a Brass Wars race, any brass car. which brass cars were popular in the early 70s in HO scale. And drove his Riggins. Made a decent race. I came home in second. I should have won that race, but it got taken out a lot by one guy who was running an over-wide car who they wouldn't put it through the tech block. You're supposed to put it through the tech block and be legal width. His car was over wide and they wouldn't change it. So I'd be out in the lead, I'd come up to lap him and I'd get taken out. I couldn't get by him. So I came home in second, but it was a good run. But Ron invited Dave and I back to his house, which is an incredible mansion in the mountains in New Jersey, and showed us all this stuff that he had, and really nice guy, really fun guy. But Dave and I were telling him, we really didn't care much for the car. They didn't handle well. They were just really awkward to drive. He's like, well, what would you guys do? And we started telling him some of our ideas. Said, well, would you build some Riggins up that way? Like, sure. So he paid some decent money. We started putting these cars together, made some changes to them, some drastic changes, especially in the front end. And between Dave and I and some help from Bob Lincoln of Wizard as well, we came up with these cars, built 10 cars. They're all identical, except for that they were numbered. I actually engraved the number of each car on the bottom of the car, along with my racing logo. And then we put, the only thing I didn't like about this car, this green wire armature. So Ron had a thing for these green wire armatures. So these were really rare, very powerful motors. And Ron loved these motors. They were hard to find in the 70s. Ron somehow found an entire stash of them. So he has like thousands of these motors. And he insisted that I use this motor in this car. It was way too much motor for this car, but he wouldn't let me use the regular motor. So that's the only thing I didn't like about the car. But it made it very difficult to drive. So this is Dave and I posing with the 10 cars. This is the car from the bottom. This is chassis 007, which I held on to race. He wanted to get a race win with one of the cars. So we had a Brass Wars race coming up at our track. And I ran this car in that race. The other 9 cars I sent to Riggin. He put them on the internet and sold them. And he actually, I didn't know he was going to do this, he actually named the cars after me. So it was the Riggin Boss Spena Super Modified. They sold for $125 a piece, and they sold out like instantly. And then so I had this last car. This is how I ran the car in the race. So I had to add, you can see this is all lead weight that I put in the front of the car and on the sides here. And I had to do that to keep the car down, because it had so much power, you just wanted to launch all the time. And even with my controller, the controllers that we have, they have a choke, so you can actually turn the power down. You don't have to run full power. I have never run without full power except for this car, because as soon as you hit full power, it would just roll itself into a ball and go rolling down the racetrack. There's way too much power. But I even added brass weights to the inside of the rear wheels to help keep the thing under control. And I did wind up winning the race. It was a tough race. Beat Dave. Dave came in second. But it was a fight the whole way. And it was like, driving this car was like walking on eggshells. I like to drive aggressively. I like to slide the car around. You could not do this with this car. You had to be perfectly smooth with this car. And so I called Ron Bernstein up after the race, told him, won the race. He was very happy. I was very happy. I mean, he paid me a lot of money to build these cars. I didn't want to come away with it without winning the race, right? So I was very happy. He was happy. And he asked me if I wanted to keep the car. And of course, I was thrilled to be able to do that. So I have this car. It's actually on display over at the center today as well. And about 4 years ago, I had somebody get in touch with me who had one of these. Only person I've ever spoken to who had one. And I figured he has it sitting on the shelf somewhere because they're almost undrivable. And I asked the guy how he liked it, and he goes, "Oh, I love it." And I said, "So, what are you doing with it?" So he's got a big oval. And it's got like a 40-foot straightaway. So it's like the perfect place for this car. And he loved it. So we talked a little bit, talked a little bit about the BRP connection and the work I did with Tom Bowman. And this was another cool thing that came out of all of that. So on the left here you have a Ford GT40 mounted on a T-Jet chassis. This is actually a road racing replica's body, but it's identical to the Aurora mold, which came out in the late 60s. And it's a very popular car for T-Jet racing because they're very light. On the right here, this is the final iteration of the GT40 as BRP did it. And so what had happened, BRP came out with the GT40, which I showed you earlier, that we used at the shootout, and it had this like a front splitter on it, and the car handled really well. But on some of the tracks where you need a little more traction, there really wasn't enough bite. The car had too much weight balanced toward the front. And so I asked Tom to build a car with a tail section on it that we could play with. And Tom came up with this, and he came up with this wedge nose as well. And then he named the car after me. So this is the Ford GT Spena edition, which you could actually buy from BRP. So I was like really flattered to have the car named after that. And I have a couple of these on display over there as well. So you can see how much lower it sits than the GT40. You can see the running board here on the side. If you notice, what's really critical with these running boards, they sit lower than the center line of the axles. So you have all this nice chunk of weight raised down low, really made a nice center of gravity, let the car slide around nicely. And you've got this back piece here, and you've got the fender flare so the wheels aren't sticking out, so which makes it easier to pass people. And this nose, this is actually the second generation of the nose. The first nose is a little more angular, which I actually liked a little bit better. This one looked nicer, but the angular nose worked better. And when you're coming up behind somebody, if they weren't letting you by, you could just scoop them right out of the way, which was fantastic. And even when there's accidents, usually you have to wait, because with the non-magnet car, if you hit another car that's parked on the track, it's just going to pop you out. With this car, you can just go right underneath them and just give it a little throttle and just scoot them right out of the way. So it was wonderful. And it was also a really well-balanced race car. Won a lot of races with this car. Here they are from the front and from the back. Again, you can see the difference in the height. And even the roof line, we were able to lower the roof line down quite a bit from the GT40. And part of that, they opened up the rear window so you could drop the rear of the car down below the gear in the back. So you see this gear you're looking at here is the front gear on the GT40. The back gear is actually in this area. But here you can see the back of the car is actually lower than the rear gear on the SE. And this is the two cars from the bottom. Here you can see the big chunk of weight that we had in the bottom of the car. So this is all carved out up above it. So this is all lightweight up in here. And you see the car almost looks dark in places. So what we would do, these would come as a solid chunk of resin. And it'd take probably about 4 hours of carving. I would stand with a Dremel tool underneath a light, with goggles and face mask on, and just slowly grind the body away until it was basically paper thin. And that's how you made a really good, lightweight, fast racing body. You can see how much more simple the original GT40 was. And again, eventually these cars were banned from everywhere. But we won a lot of races before we got banned. These are how you could buy the GT40. So these were limited edition. This one here, when I won my 1,000th race, BRP did a limited run of 15 cars commemorating that. And this was number 1, which BRP gave me, which is all in gold. And I still have that in the package. This is the flip side. So this is a picture of my actual car that I won my 1,000th race with in April of 2004. And they put that was the back side of the package. And then when I won my second national championship in 2004, they came out with another limited edition run for the U4 National Championship. This, some of you guys will recognize, this is Trans Am champion, Tommy Kendall. So, again, the slot car racing has led to some really interesting things. And one of them was I got to have a match race with Tommy Kendall. So this was up at Watkins Glen. We had a track up there at the vintage races. And at the time, Tommy was doing commentary for Indy cars. And so he was a little bit controversial with his commentary. And Tommy and I had kind of a back and forth, fun thing, but we had a good time. We had a back and forth thing going, and I got him to race me in slot cars. He'd raced slot cars when he was younger out in California. And I gave him a head start, but I beat him pretty badly. And he remembers that too. So this was back in probably 2002 or 3, and I saw him. I hadn't seen him since then, and I saw him last summer. Ran into him, and we got talking about this. He remembered it, and he had a lot of fun. Nice guy. This is the Fray. So out in California, this big race. This is really what really drove the T-Jets to come back. Dave talked a little bit about the Fray T-Jets when he was talking. So this race out in California, they have 8 tracks in this room, and you have teams come from all over, and they race. These are 6-lane race tracks. And went out there for two years in a row. I went out there as part of Team Wizard, and we struggled. We did not. We came home third, I think. Either second and third or third and fourth. I can't remember exactly now, but we could not beat the Kansas City teams. We never did figure out what they were doing to get traction. The tracks would get really dirty and oily. The Kansas City guys were hooked up. We could not get hooked up on that stuff. But it was a really cool experience. And this particular track, this is what they call the black track, which is they label all the tracks by the color of the borders around them. This is the first time I raced on a Bowman track. And this is the best track I've ever raced on. Just an incredible rhythm to this track, really well balanced between straightaways and corners. So we gave the Kansas City guys hell on this track. They would crush us on the front straightaway. They'd gain about, this is a 12-foot straightaway. They would gain 3 feet on us down the front straightaway. And then we would fight back. And by the time I got about here, I would have the lead back. And then we get to the front straightaway and they go right back by me again. But we gave them a hard time. It was fun. A great track to race on. And this is 2002 team here and 2003 here. We were actually a better team in 2003, but we finished 1 spot further down. There was another team that was even better ahead of us. And this is a group of us. We went to the Redwoods. That track is held in that area of the country. Beautiful up there. So that's us inside of a hollowed out redwood. Really impressive. I would have never been able to get out to California and see something like that without the professional slot car racing. This is the Cat Spa ring. Most people consider this to be the greatest slot car track in the world. A fellow by the name of Greg Katz, he had terminal cancer. He decided he wanted to have the best slot car track there was. So he hired Brad Bowman and Jason Boy. Jason Boy is a modeler, to build this track, landscaping, everything. As you see it here, the way it sits here, the landscaping wasn't quite done yet. It is done now. I couldn't find as good of a picture to show you the angles with this, but the landscaping is absolutely spectacular. Detail is incredible. But this track has elements of Spa and the Nürburgring in it. So if you look right in here, that is Eau Rouge in HO scale. And in a T-Jet, non-magnet car, when you come up over the crest here, the car gets light. And it will come out of the slot if you don't hit it just right. It also has elements of Road Atlanta, if you look at the S's through here. And there's parts of the Nürburgring that are in this track. Just an incredible track. Very long track. Not a great track to race on because it's so wide, you can't reach across the track to marshal it. If you come off in the middle, you're kind of stuck there. But just to drive it, it's just an absolute pleasure to drive this track. It was an absolute blast. And to give you an idea, the average track at that time, we were probably running about 6 to 7 second lap times with a T-Jet. And this track, I think we were running 18 to 19 second laps. So it was really an adventure in itself as you're driving around. This is our team posing for a picture when we got to race at the Cat Spa. And Greg Katz passed away about a year after we were there. The track went into storage, and about 4 years ago, a club a lot like ours got together, and they were able to purchase the track, they didn't hire, Brad Bowman volunteered, and they put the track back together, and now they have it running again out in California. And they have, the pit lane is all lit up and everything. They have 24-hour races on this track with the lights and everything. It's fantastic.
The monorail works and everything.
Yeah, the monorail actually functions. It's
It wouldn't fit in the shop, so we couldn't get it. So.
yeah. I'm sure that's the only reason why we couldn't get it.
I'd be living on your sofa, but besides that.
Yeah. So that's the end. So the last thing I'd just like to say, if you guys are ever in this area, come up and see our club, see our tracks, come race with us. It's a great time. We have a lot of fun. We have a lot of really good, nice people, and it's a blast. You know, it's again, it all comes back to Pocket Rocket Raceway and great memories and great people, and Dave, two of my best buddies. Now after this, we would have never met if it weren't for Pocket Rocket Raceway and Scott Walker.
It's true.
So, thank you. Yes, we'll take questions. So, does anybody have any questions? Yes.
On the 24th and 32nd cars, what kind of tires are you guys running?
It kind of depends on the class, but
Yeah, the 124 scale cars, we're using the H&R silicones. We use that in the plastic track. Tires, we found out the NSR tires, we do like those. It's great manufacturer, great tires. Then we discovered the slotted F22 tires for the slotted class, which you're doing in 2 weeks. Those tires will stay clean. We did an enduro. We could go a couple hours before you had to clean your tires. A lot of times you try to use the same tires, so it kind of evens out the field. You know, if you have the same tires, the same motors, you got a chance.
And one thing we do, Dave talks about the tires. I talked about at the beginning how with Pocket Rocket, part of my job was to come back and teach the other racers. And we still do that. So when you come and race at our place, there's no guessing as to what works and what doesn't. We'll tell you, this is the gear ratio you need to run to be competitive. These are the tires you need to run to be competitive. And we don't play games with that. And it helps keep people coming back. It helps people become competitive faster. And it also helps, I mean, again, we went to the national races. If we weren't sharing that information and making ourselves better, it would have been that much harder for us to beat the guys at the big races. Yeah. So it pays off all the way around. It's a lot better way to do things.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yes?
Are you using any kind of braking systems like this? Like back in the, I don't know, probably 60s, I had a set and it had a spring that would wrap around the front axle and a weight would swing forward to brake. Do they still do anything like that?
We don't have anything like that, but the cars are set up for dynamic braking. I should say the controllers are set up for dynamic braking. So when you let all the way off the throttle, there's a contact on the back of the trigger, and it basically turns the motor into a generator, and so it slows the car down very quickly. And some of the controllers are adjustable with that too. So if you get too much braking, you can lock the rear up. You can actually knock that down so you get less braking. So that's how braking is done these days. Yes. We have Facebook.
We have Facebook. Slot Car Club of the Twin Tiers. That's probably the easiest. We're not that technical, so Facebook's pretty easy. I can do it on my phone, and I can do it at work.
And we also have flyers over there, which has a lot of information on it. You can grab that and take it with you.
Friend me right now. I'll friend you right back. So.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. I guess that's it. Anybody else?
Questions? Come on.
Oh, one more. Yes, you.
Yeah, you estimate a kind of an entry-level price tag to get into, say, a 124 scale?
About $50.
How much money you got? No.
Yeah.
The chassis run about 40. The model bodies you can find reasonably cheap. We do change out the motors and gearing. a lot what we try to do is to try to make it economical. Like the group's racing the Porsche 962 and 956s next in 2 weeks. It's pretty much you could buy a car for $45 or $40. The tires are pretty reasonable. You put a little weight in it. I mean, some places you go, they want to make money. We have never made money, so.
Tom, we even talked about being a not-for-profit for the research center.
Yeah.
We're a negative profit.
Yeah. Tom.
When's the next 8 hour?
We had
Dave, when is
6
the next 8
hours.
hour?
Funny you ask about that. We had the talk on Friday night for October again. If Team Chaos wants to do that, I can't remember my anniversary date. I know the team name that you raced with the shirts. Yeah, that's the way my brain works.
Yeah. And what's wrong with that?
I don't know.
See.
Yeah.
No, I will come back racing for the 8 hour. I love the 8 hour. That was
You want to race on Tom? You want to race on Tom's team?
I don't know about that, but no, I'm kidding. I would race on Tom's team. I don't think Tom would want me on his team. No smog machine.
Any other questions? Yes, sir.
You have these long races, are you standing up or sitting on a chair?
We got padding. We stand up. You take turns. Usually we break it up. The 8 hours, I think, was an hour, wasn't it?
The 8 hour race was 1 hour segments, and you could break it up however you wanted to. So some of us would run the whole hour, and some guys couldn't do that. They'd split their hour up. And most of the time in our shorter races, we don't allow chairs or stools at the racetrack because when you're marshaling or if you have to pit, somebody might have to go around somebody and it can cause problems. But because of the uniqueness of the 8 hour, we do allow people to sit on a bar stool at the table.
And we are getting older, so it's, yeah.
Well, you are.
Yeah.
Slot cars are the fountain of youth. If you'd started earlier, you'd be young like me.
Yeah, and skinnier too?
Well, maybe, yeah.
Yeah, it's the Wendy's.
Yeah.
Yes.
How many laps can you do in an hour's time?
Do you remember, Dave? I'm trying.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah, I think if I remember right, for the 8 hour race, we were totaling over 8,000. We were probably close to 9,000 laps for the 8 hour enduro. Yeah, so they were. I think we were running around 3 to 4 second laps. Was that right? High 3 second, low 4 second range. And it changed. I mean, the cars, they're like real race cars. There's no magnets in those cars. So as the race goes on, the tires get dirtier, the car starts to change, the track gets dirtier, the track changes. So your lap times will vary, but just like they would with real racing. But yeah, I think it was around 8,000 or 9,000 laps we were pulling. Yes.
For both of you guys, when you first started running when you were kids and stuff, everybody used to have these. The cars you can remember, which were your favorite body styles? I remember I had like a Corvette, when I had a little Buick. What were your favorites?
Frank liked anything Ford.
No. They know better than that.
I like I got quite a collection of the FX cars. I liked the 917. What was the RC Cola car? The 917.
That's a 917-10.
10.
Yep.
That was one of my favorites. I mean, it was hard when we were kids because you pretty much had to buy what they had at the store. You didn't have the internet. I know your daughter doesn't comprehend that thought at all, but you pretty much had to buy what you had. The Auto World catalog would come. That would be, that would be entertainment for months.
Yeah.
Sending in your money order and getting your car in the mail. You had to wait like 3 weeks to get your stuff. That was, killed you.
Yeah. My favorite car was the Aurora G Plus Ferrari 312 PB. A really well detailed car and really handled well.
Probably the best.
One of the best. I like that one. I like the Williams FW07, which is the car that Alan Jones won the last Grand Prix with up here. and a Formula One car, also an Aurora G Plus, and I won a lot of races with one of those. My parents bought me that one at the Hobby Hut in Elmira Heights. I still remember how excited I was to get that car, and won a lot of races with that car.
Good question.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Any other good questions?
Any questions at all, actually. Don't have to be good.
Yeah, got to top that one.
All right. Thank you.
Everyone's invited back to the center for more discussion, and
Right,
we'll
yes.
do the drawing for the door prize. So please join us back there.
Good job, Dave. Dave, stay up here. You want to stay?
Okay, yes, dear.
I've been searching far and wide, searching for answers beyond the great divide. I've been looking deep within, looking to find what's always been inside of me, inside of me, inside of me. Lord knows I'm not getting any younger, I'm getting older every day. 30-some years gone by so fast, can't get the time to stay. This world keeps spinning faster and faster, and with all the separateness, we're just one big disaster. Gotta come together, come together, come together right now.